calling this Board of Adjustment meeting for the City of Rolling Wood to order at 4:34 p.m. on March 10, 2026. We'll begin with roll call. Start down.
Casey Hoffman.
Keith Martinson.
Susan Hinton.
Jerry Spitel. By city ordinance, anyone who is going to speak before the board has to be sworn in, including staff. So anyone who intends to speak before the board, please stand up to be sworn in.
Maybe.
Okay.
Here's so we
Okay.
can be seen right above camera.
Okay.
Just since last time we weren't. Just make sure.
Okay, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give in the proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. Next, we have public comments from citizens on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
Okay. Next item is the consent agenda. Decision and possible action on minutes from the May 28, 2025 Board of Adjustment meeting.
I would move they are accepted as presented.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. We're now on to the regular agenda. By our rules, the chair of the board has to be reelected every year. This is the first meeting of 2026, so we have to have an election for the chair of the board.
I would move Jerry be our new board, continuing board president or director, whatever.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'll recuse myself. Three yes, one recuse. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing. Before we open the public hearing, are there any requests for postponement or issues of standing that anyone would like to raise? Hearing none, we will proceed with a presentation by the staff on the variance being requested at this meeting.
Good afternoon, board. So the case before you is for 104 Laura Lane, and they are asking for a variance from section 10734, which is fences, to permit the location and effective height of a proposed screening wall along the front and side yard of the property. A presentation will be presented to you shortly by the applicant, and they are proposing this screening wall, which by definition is a fence. It is being proposed along the front of the property, in which counts as a front yard fence because it is beyond the foundation or main foundation of the home. And the placement of where they're wanting to place it is considered the front yard. Any fencing beyond that foundation is under that definition and must meet 3 foot in height, 80% opacity, and what they are proposing did not meet that. So it is being brought before you for that. And if you have any questions, we can get those at the end after the presentation.
What, do you know what percent visibility it is?
I don't know what the actual opacity of it is, but it's definitely not 80.
Yeah, it looks way less than 80%.
How did we become aware of this issue?
The applicant contacted me, just they were wanting to do some landscaping and widen their walkscape, and the detail of the fencing and screening was brought into question just because they knew it was something that was different, and they knew that what they had met the code, but why what they want was not meeting the code. So we discussed it and we tried to find ways somehow that it would work, and it was just not coming up with the way they were wanting it planned to go with their landscaping.
Thank you.
I see no more questions, so thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the presentation by the applicant.
So applicant has a few items that she is going to pass out. All these items are currently in the packet that was just uploaded and refreshed before the meeting. I believe she's got copies of the packet presentation that she's going to be presenting, as well as letters of support, or?
I have the letters of support that were sent to me that I
Okay.
sent you, and there's two that I have that weren't.
I added back in. So all letters of support are currently in the packet as of prior to the meeting at 4:30. And then the presentation, just so that you guys can view it.
Here's just a printed copy of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna give you two copies, actually. Thank you. Hello, my name is Shulpa Amin. My husband Steve Pullen and I live at 104 Laura Lane. This is our variance request, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our request. So the first slide that I wanted to show you was kind of the existing condition. As you can see, the pool is the retaining wall for the pool is fairly visible. This is from the conditions of the street are such that there's the street, the curb, and then there's a retaining wall, and then there's like a little bit of a rise and then a slope back down towards the house, just on this portion of the lot. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with Rollingwood. There's lots of varying grading conditions throughout the neighborhood. So this is the condition we're trying to solve, which is sort of the bare and barren nature of this particular area. So for context, currently the retaining wall is visible from the street. This is due to the lot geometry and the required setbacks. The pool structure sits a little bit below our, a few steps below the slab of the house, but it leaves the concrete retaining wall visible from Laura Lane. After the pool was built, but before the C of O was issued, the city asked us to put in this riprap French drain, sort of rock section, which you can see in the other photo. Sorry to go back and forth, but you can kind of see it coming down the slope. That was asked of us from the city before we got the C of O. So it kind of wraps around, and I'll show you a site plan that kind of shows all of this in a moment. And so we think the screen that we're proposing really softens this area and makes it much more palatable and pleasing to passersby. And then for context, out of the build line, the proposed structure is the last 5 or 6 feet of it is what's out of the build line. So we reached out to some of our neighbors, the ones directly across the street, people who look at this property every day, neighbors who are adjacent to us, And I think we talked to 11 or 12 people, and we got 11 letters of support emailed back to us, which was really nice. I think everyone kind of liked the decorative breeze block screen and the privacy, just because it's the pool there. So it won't be the entire property, it'll just be in front of the pool. And then conditions creating this constraint. I think the key one is really that Laura Lane curves at that juncture. So the the build line is not parallel to the house. It actually is diagonal, and it cuts in at the pool. So that's one of the big constraints. And then the other one is the significant grade change. This photo is taken from the street, and as you can see, from the house, it's a fairly significant. I think it's 8.5 feet from the house to the curb. And here you can also in the back see the city. The riprap French drain situation that comes down the slope and then around towards the back of the pool. We did put in some vegetation. It's really, really rocky right there, so it's hard to get bigger plants in because of the rocks, and everything we put in has died thus far between the rocks and the deer. So it's not a long-term durable solution, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And then here's just some more photos from different places. Top left would be from that same location on the street. Top right shows there's that sort of 3-foot retaining wall, the brick retaining wall that was existing. I think it was built in the 80s. And then from the actual location of the riprap, you can see sort of how wide it is and how it comes down that slope and then bends around. So this is basically the, if you'll notice on this, the round circles around the pool, that's the riprap drainage. The red line is the build line, and you can see how it's kind of diagonal as opposed to being parallel to the house. And then the blue line is where we're proposing to put the screen. And you can see that small sort of pie-shaped. It's 40 feet, and it's essentially the last 5 or 6 feet, I believe, that crosses the build line. So what we're asking for is basically, the next, actually maybe go to the next one because it shows you kind of what we're looking for. So essentially we would build a planter along that riprap French drain. The planter would obviously soften that concrete wall quite a bit, and then there would be a attached frame made out of tubular steel which would have the breeze block inside. And so I understand the need for the 80%, I believe, transparency. We're requesting this just because it's a pool behind it. I mean, obviously, if that's not doable, then we can come up with another solution. But we think that this would be the best solution. It provides a straight line across the top, and then the transition is softened by the planter, which follows the grade. And then this is just the rendering from the landscaper, which basically lists out sort of the materials that would be used. And so I did put in a section. We wanted to, make sure that we satisfied the criterion for the variance. So the first one, we really think it's the curved lot, the steep grade. It's a combination of these things that kind of create the hardship. We think that the screen height the screen will look modest in height when compared to the massing of the whole building. It's a 2-story brick building with eaves in 3 or 4 different places. So I think that it's not going to look out of place when compared to the building as a whole. The pool is currently compliant because it is 4 feet above grade. but having an extra fence only helps with safety, I think. Because of the curved lot with the placing the building line where it is, and because drainage takes up the only available space, we think this is kind of the only feasible path in terms of location. It's unique to this property. We don't think it will create a general precedent. And then we think that because it's tied into the landscape structure, the planter, that it's not necessarily a fence in the traditional sense. It doesn't encompass the property. There's not walls. It's not going to be, the entire property will not be surrounded by this. It's just for screening the pool. And that's what we have. We really appreciate your time and your consideration, and please let me know if you have any questions.
We'll come to questions
Yeah,
later. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Do we have any comments from neighboring parties living within 250 feet of the applicant's property? I sense none. Do we have any comments from other interested parties? Okay,
Maybe, but I want to hear what you guys think first.
okay. So, does staff have any further comments? Okay, questions from the Board of Adjustments?
I actually have some questions. I've been walking by the property for years, so I kind of want some historical information. The pool is considered not a front yard pool, is that correct? Or is it considered a side yard pool, or does that make a difference?
So it is not considered a front yard pool because it lines up with the front of the foundation of the home. So visually, it looks like it's in the front side of the home, but by the definition, it's
Okay.
in line, and it's within the build line.
Okay. And then the screen that you're proposing is it inclusive with the planter? I think you kind of explained that. Is the planter part of the request or just the screen?
If you want to come up here, just so we have it on record.
So my understanding is that it would be, it's functionally two different things in that one's a planter and one's a screen, but they are going to be attached. In that, at least it's my understanding, obviously they're gonna drill down for the posts, but then for extra security, I guess, on the thing, it will be attached to the fence. To the planter. So I think, at least my understanding is that because the planter's a landscaping element, it wouldn't be part of this request.
Yeah, I understand that the variance is a request to have a higher fence than is allowed, a more opaque fence than is allowed, and to have a portion of the fence go into the setback, which you can see on this,
Which is that little,
It's the
where the
pie
blue
shape,
line
triangle.
crosses the red. The blue line that you have is the fence line.
Well, if it's a fence, no, the fence line's only 15 foot back, not 30 foot. The build line's 30 foot back. You can have a front yard fence within 15 feet of the build, 15 feet from the, so the fence is actually can be built 15 feet back from the,
Okay, so
so.
the variance
If
then
you
is,
define this as a fence, it's not in, that little triangular section is really not, it's sort of moot.
okay, so then
But the question is this a fence or is this, something else?
as I understand the ordinance, my conversations with Nikki, this is by our ordinance a fence. Now,
Okay, I mean, that's the first thing, if we define it as a fence as opposed to something to break the side of the line,
yeah.
then the question I have is, if it's a pool, it has to have a fence around it, right?
It has to have 4 feet of elevation, so that, you see part of the pool is not fenced, and I've been told that it's 4 feet off the ground, which I have some skepticism about, or that, and actually, if it was my pool, I'd be concerned about that, but that's neither here nor there. But Nikki has confirmed to me that the pool as now fenced and constructed meets our pool ordinance. So as long as you have a wall that is more than 4 feet high, in this case, that's the retaining.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
So
That's
there's a
considered-
4-foot barrier.
That's
It
considered
doesn't-
a barrier to the pool.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a fence, it has to be a 4-foot high barrier, it can be all sorts of different things.
So we're making the assumption this is not a screen, but this is a fence. I mean, that's the city's position is this is a fence, not a screen.
Correct.
So therefore, the screen thing is gone. So we need to look at it from a fence. And like Jerry said, the 2 things I see, if it's a fence, it can only be 3 feet tall and needs 80% visibility. So based on that,
That's why you need a variance if we're.
that's
to
why you need a
build.
variance.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with the little triangle area.
No, okay, yes, we've clarified that, got it. I guess I have a couple of questions too. The existing fence that you have, since it's on the build line, it can be as opaque as you want, and it could be extended all the way around the pool, so that's completely doable without a variance, so I'm trying to understand why that is not being explored or done.
Right, so, when we built the pool, they put in fences to, so there's a fence to where the 4-foot part starts, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the picture, yeah.
And then, what that doesn't take into account though is the retaining wall for the pool. So if we built a fence up on the pool deck, the way it is, or if we just extended the existing fence, the neighbors have commented to me that, they'd like to see something in front of the, retaining wall.
Okay, but I'm not clear to me that aesthetics is an unnecessary hardship.
So let me ask, I think Jerry, you have a small fence going up to the edge of the pool right now. Is that fence for the city legal? If we were to extend that fence around the pool, would it still be legal?
I understand that the answer to both those questions is yes, and you can make that fence as opaque as you want,
Yeah,
because it's behind the build line.
yeah. Well, it's actually not the build line we're concerned about, it's the position of the
slab,
the foundation.
Front of,
the
excuse me,
foundation
front
line.
of the foundation is what I meant to say.
So they're saying is if they were to continue that wrought iron fence around the pool, you don't have a screen, but you have a valid fence.
Correct.
And it seems to me that's the solution. But we need, I guess, we need to talk about, I mean, I would move that we don't accept the screen as it's presented. If it's time to do something like that, Jerry.
I want to make sure all other board members have a chance to ask their questions, because I think Susan
Well,
might have had more questions.
Are you gonna take out the wrought iron fence? Or does that stay?
No, that would say, it's got, the locking gate,
Okay.
so as it comes back around to the house.
And does what you wanna put in, does that stop at the fence?
Yeah, so it would basically be, just the 40 feet from probably a little bit past the edge of the pool to, probably right past the fence.
And I can't, tell by the pictures, does it go back?
No.
Just the front?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the back side down at the very
If you
bottom
wanna
of the.
show like where the fence would be, where the planters would be, just so they can visualize that from where the riprap is, where the planters will be, where the screening will be.
Sure. So this is basically, the riprap,
guess the other thing to clarify for the board is they're not allowed to build in that section as riprap because it's for drainage.
Correct.
And so is this for privacy?
It's twofold. One for privacy, I think more from the neighbors for us. Like for us, it's kind of nice to be able to look out onto the street. But we don't really look at the house from this perspective very much. But one of the neighbors, towards the end of last year asked me to come over and she lives right across the street, so this is kind of their view. And so she was wondering what our plan was, and we kind of come up with a couple of different options. But with this riprap, the way it is, sort of everything falls, at least my understanding was, outside of the building area.
Staff, can I get a clarification point? For this, would, regardless of what the fence looks like, both variances would still be required to have any kind of anything put up, is that correct? So like, there's no fence, whether it's completely opaque, or wrought iron like this, a variance is required for both because the base of the front and the pie shape.
I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
Sure.
But
So-
let me.
Yeah, of course.
So if they were to extend the wrought iron fencing, as in, we're looking at the left picture down here where it says city required riprap and French drain occupies build line area. If they were to extend the fencing as is along the pool area as it goes further back and then cuts back, they can do that. If they are to put a fence or anything in front of the pool area, that is, one, going to start impeding on the riprap, which is a function of draining. And then if they were to put it anywhere in front of the riprap going towards the street, that's where it's impeding on the build line and going in front of the foundation for the home.
So is some of the issue the planters?
No.
No, okay. Just
So,
wanna clarify that.
I mean, I think the way I'm trying to, maybe I could respond, as long as they were to build a fence that's no higher than 3 feet tall and has 80% opacity, they could build that fence along where it's now proposed. It's the size, the height of the fence and the opacity that is causing the need for a variance.
Yes.
Can they do any planting in the riffraff?
No.
It's gotta be left the way it is?
Mhm.
So if they wanna plant a screen, it's gotta be in front of the riffraff.
Front of the riprap or attached to the foundation and a porch line where just like the fence is currently.
I mean, I would agree, that's solid rock there, so to plant something, you have to get a jackhammer or some serious rock bar in there to do the work, but that's been done in Rollingwood.
Or put planters in, which is what a lot of people do.
Or
so you
planters,
bring
yeah, put the
soil
big
in.
planters in.
Right, but that riprap as pictured will have to stay that way, functioning that way.
Yeah, the planters would have to be between the street and the riprap,
Correct.
which as is shown on the diagram that the applicant has given us. Any more questions?
As far as the neighbors go, you have these letters supporting you. Were there any neighbors or anybody who told you they did not support this?
No one that I've talked to, no.
How about somebody that you didn't talk to, but you heard of that wasn't?
I have not, I don't know if Nikki,
I didn't receive any comments besides the letter of support.
Okay.
And a letter did go out to all the neighbors, and they have a sign in front of their house right now, so the neighbor
Yes.
should know about it.
Yes. Neighbors were notified, 250 feet, and the sign was placed out front.
So I have a question. is in regard to the request, though. It's the area, at that end next to Hollis's house. What is all that? I mean, you kind of explained it, but will that be left alone where you have the rock
So,
fence?
if,
It's not pictured, it's
yeah,
on the
well,
side.
it's, so, this is Hollis's house, this is the riprap, there's like a, I'm not sure what that's called, that chicken coop. that they
Right,
make
what
with,
is that called?
With the rocks inside.
Oh, like a gabion.
Agavian, yes, Agavian cage or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what this is. So at the bottom of the hill, there's a Agavian cage, and then there are trees that are hard to picture here. And then from, so this was all existing. There's an existing sort of landscape bed that's much higher than, and that was existing. We didn't take that out. So there's a fence, and then there's some trees in that landscape bed that was there from before we remodeled the house. And so that's what's between our house and his house.
So I guess you can't ask what you planned, but there are pipes and, will that just be left?
The pipes for the pool? Or
Is that what it is? I didn't know what it was when I looked.
the pipes that come out of the existing, the brick wall? That's the water from the back part of the house. Everything goes into a French drain and then comes out these pipes
Okay.
at the bottom of that planter.
The recent remodeling that you did, was that in the front of the house?
So the house actually, when we started to remodel, started to come apart a little bit, so we had to take.
Oh, I'm sorry, just so we have it for record,
So,
thank you.
I'm sorry, so the house looks, it's the same basic shape as the old house, it's the same floor plan, but when we started to, when they started to take out some of the interior walls, like the brick started to come down, so we ended up taking the house down to the foundation and redoing a lot of the framing and putting in new joists and roof and all of that.
On the very first page, by the way, my compliments, this is very attractive, but
Thank you.
was this recently done, the front door?
Yes, so all of that, we finished in mid-2004.
Sarah?
Sarah Hudson, 2805 Rockaway. So, to me, the fence, the screen, is not necessary other than for aesthetics. If they are confident that the fence that is there is compliant with our code, and that doesn't count as a front yard fence as it is now, and the planter doesn't require variance. And so it seems to me that aside of the fact that I wouldn't want a pool in my front yard, just because from privacy concerns, but it's there, it seems like you could just plant taller stuff in the planter and let that provide the screening from the road, and then you don't have to worry about what the visibility through the fence is, or the height, right? Then it's not a front yard fence, so you don't have to worry about that. It provides the screening that the neighbors are wanting, and if they wanted more privacy, they could put a totally non-see-through fence along the wall of the pool, and that would give them the privacy that they wanted without having to have a variance for a fence in front of the riprap.
Could I ask the applicant to respond to these suggestions or possibilities? Or did you consider them?
Honestly, we kind of let our landscaper come up with a couple of options, and this is the one that we liked. do agree that, you know, obviously if we don't get the variance that, would probably, I was actually just, when she was talking, thinking about, you know, 'cause a lot of people have created, retaining walls and I don't know if that makes sense though. So maybe the planter's the best sort of, solution with some sort of taller, thing. I'd have to go back to the landscaping architect and kind of see what they came up with. We, you know, for us, I think you're right, it is, the planter, I think, is probably necessary one way or the other, to screen the concrete wall. Like I said, for us, the privacy is we don't have little kids, so we probably use that pool like 3 or 4 times a year. It's less, I think for us, we like sitting out there and like watching people walk on the streets, to be perfectly honest. So I didn't necessarily want a huge wall, between us and the street, but, yeah, I mean, certainly there's probably, some other options that the landscape or can come up with.
Are you aware of, have you looked around Rollingwood to see if there are other fences like the one you're proposing?
I mean, certainly I've seen, I would say taller than 3-foot fences in other yards. I've seen concrete walls that are taller than that in other yards. I don't think I've seen a structure where there's, like breeze block on top of a planter like this one. But the reason we liked it honestly was because, you know, depending on the breeze block you choose, it can be more opaque or less. And it seemed like a nice permanent, solution to the problem.
I don't have as much experience as my fellow board
Sure.
members, and so I'm not aware of what kind of precedent this would be, or whether there's a lot of
Well,
this type of fence around, or.
I mean, from my perspective, we're supposed to enforce the ordinances unless there's a good reason not to. And that's really all we have to decide on in each individual case. And everyone's, you know, there's fences that are probably grandfathered, there may have been legitimate reasons to get exceptions, but each case has to stand on its own merits.
So was it your neighbor that wanted something up there? They didn't want to look at your pool?
Well, I think it's less about the pool and more about the concrete wall, as I understand it from her. And this is the neighbor that's directly across, from the pool. So their kitchen is what she was saying, basically looks out over the pool. So that's what she looks at when she's working in the kitchen. And honestly, like I said, I never stood in her yard and never looked at our home from that perspective. So, you know, kind of seeing it from this angle, like I said, we never really look at it from this perspective. So, it was good for her to point that out. And we definitely want to be good neighbors. We don't want to ask for anything sort of out of the norm. But you know, when our landscaper proposed this, it was kind of the plan that we thought looked the best, fits the house the best, and kind of, again, you know, it's a 2-story house that lifts pretty far off the street as it is.
Thank you. I guess at this point, I'd just like to walk the board members through what we have to find. You have a table of 7 things that we would have to say yes to in each case in order to grant the variance. The first one is a special individual reason makes the strict application of zoning ordinance an unnecessary hardship. So I guess the real thing that the board needs to wrestle with here is we're really talking about aesthetics, and does that rise to the level of unnecessary hardship? Second one is granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the division and will not be injurious to adjoining properties in neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. I would venture to say that the proposal does not cause any problems in this regard. Granting of the variance would not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare, or injurious to the property in the area. I would say, especially with the support of the neighbors, we can probably say that this is not an issue. Special circumstances or conditions such as topography, natural obstructions, aesthetic or environmental considerations affecting the land involves such that the strict application of the provisions of this division would deprive the applicant of a reasonable use of his land. We've had some conversation about topography. Granting of the variance will not have the effect of preventing the orderly development of land and other in the area in accordance with general provisions of the zoning ordinance. It seems to me that that's not an issue. 6.1 talks about sufficient water and wastewater capacity, so that's really not even applicable to here. The circumstances or conditions from which relief is sought are not solely of an economic nature. So I welcome any additional comments from the board on this.
So you're saying yes to all 7 conditions, right?
No, I'm arguing that one has to say yes to all 7 conditions in
okay.
order to.
Or are you just listing the conditions?
I'm listing the conditions. No,
Okay,
we'll
sorry.
we'll propose a motion that we can vote one way or the other one, but I just want you to be aware of what you need to be thinking of as you cast your vote.
So before we vote, I just want to compliment you on the presentation and the materials and your sensitivity to your neighbors and what you're doing with your house. So that's all well and done. So before there's a motion, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much.
So just to, it seems like we're ready for a motion. I will propose something so to keep things moving along.
We do need to make the specific findings on it. If you're gonna make the motion for each of them, you'd have to go individually, or if you wanna discuss each item and come to a consensus, yes or no, and then make the motion after that, so that we can maintain, record for each of the, required criteria.
So I think you're telling me I would have to make a motion on all 7 individual motions.
You could, or you could discuss, just go one by one and come to a full consensus with a discussion after each item. Select yes or no as you go through, and if you get to a no, then you could make a motion.
Yeah, my
Does that
impression
make
is you only need
sense?
one no. Yeah.
That's correct. So if you go individually and the first several are yes and the one following is no, then you don't have sufficient. So you should work through those individual findings until it's such that you have to vote with that. Does that make sense?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's discuss item 1 that we have to come to a consensus on. My personal concern is that this is largely aesthetic in nature, and and as much as, I mean, it looks nice and I appreciate the neighbors' concerns, but also we're not authorized to do things like that. We have to enforce the ordinance unless there's an unnecessary hardship. And I just don't see that this situation rises to the level of an unnecessary hardship.
So do we have to have a motion for that?
Well, no, I'm trying to get the range. Our attorney is asking for the
Just
board to have a
agreement.
conversation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, verbal agreement or any discussion or questions or points, anything that we can plug into the record to make sure we have a robust one, I know.
Since we have to discuss all 7,
So we get a no.
I would rather go to the easy ones.
Well, I would say number 2, granting the variance is harmony with the general purpose intent of this division. I would say that's a no. If you want to get to a no right away. Because we have a fence ordinance that says basically you need to have 70% or 80% visibility and 3-foot height. We don't have that here. So that's not in harmony with that rule, the way I read that.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So therefore, I would say we have a no on number 2. Because I strictly don't understand number one. I never have understood number one. Maybe a lawyer can explain it to me.
Yeah, so typically unnecessary hardship is that it's that to force the applicant to comply with the law would create a circumstance in which that is burdensome on the applicant through no fault of their own, is typically how that's considered. And so an example for funds, the only time funds can really be considered is if in the event that it exceeds an incredible threshold of the cost to come into compliance. And so in that circumstance, if it costs 75% of the cost of the building to come into compliance, that can be an unnecessary hardship because it's disproportional to the requiring them to come into compliance. And so I use that as an example of the only time funds are typically accounted for, but to hopefully demonstrate the burden requirement, that it must be burdensome and not your fault or economic, but for.
But that's in another set of questions. The economic economic hardships, there's another set of questions that,
Yes.
where that comes up. That, to me, is not in this area here.
It can be, and so it's any way that it could be an additional burden on them, that it's unnecessary for the circumstances that exist and the facts. And so that's where, to some of the original point, it's very fact intensive and individualized, because what may be a burden or a hardship in one circumstance is not necessarily a burden or a hardship in another circumstance. So there are many factors, I know it's a little nebulous, but there are many factors that can be accounted for that. And so through the discussion of what the body thinks could go to it not being an unnecessary hardship is helpful for that piece of the discussion for record keeping. Does that better address?
Yep.
So any more discussion on item 2? Item 3 is granting the variance will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare, or injurious to property in the area. I would say yes on that one, but no,
You don't
if
have
there's
to.
a no vote on any of these, we can,
Oh, what's number 2? That's a no in my mind.
and number 1's a no on my mind,
Yeah, so I think there's no reason to really go through the others.
yeah.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Well, we have the record notated for all of that. And so then you can go ahead and make a motion if you'd like.
And that should be an affirmative or negative.
In the affirmative.
I move that we approve the request for variance related to fence height and fence opacity on this application. Somebody needs a second.
Well, I will second, but,
Okay,
no, I
yeah.
won't second. I'm not gonna second it. Because I'm gonna vote against it.
You can second, remember, all motions have to be cast in the
Okay,
affirmative.
I will second it.
We have a second from Keith. We'll have a voice vote starting at the other end. Yes or no to approving the variance.
I can read the board, but I'm gonna vote yes.
Okay, I'll vote no.
I vote no.
No. 3 noes, 1 yes. The variance is not granted. Seeing that we have no further business, we'll adjourn this meeting at 5:23 p.m.
Well, I mean,